The Edmonton Oilers fell to the Vancouver Canucks Saturday night in a game that ultimately is probably going to lead Connor McDavid to getting suspended for at least one game. All of that and a whole lot more on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, on today's show, the officiating, of course, the officiating, McDavid probably getting suspended, the game itself, and why the Oilers continuing to fall behind early in games is becoming a problem. So, let's just come out and say it. I will probably not be the most popular person for saying this, but Connor McDavid deserves a one-game suspension for the cross-check on Connor Garland. I can say objectively that is a dangerous and unnecessary play, and it is incumbent upon McDavid, regardless of his stature, regardless of his status as best player in the world, captain of the team, all of that. It is incumbent upon him to not lose himself, and it is very frustrating. It is very difficult. And a lot of us will attest to this in our personal lives. It is frustrating and challenging to do the right thing, to accept being wronged and leave it at that. In the world of professional sports, it is a little bit different. In the world of hockey in particular, there is an implicit understanding that things are going to be handled by the players. And a lot of the conjecture around safety within hockey is rooted in the idea that the players police the game, that the referees are there to make sure no one gets hurt, and the referees are there to call penalties. There is an implicit understanding by the simple fact that fighting has yet to be outlawed, that the players, if something should be deemed unnecessary, dangerous, or unethical by the guys playing in the game, they have recourse. And it's not just incumbent upon the officials who were bad in that game. There were missed calls on both teams. McDavid should have gotten called for that high stick. I believe it was on Quinn Hughes. It might have been on Philip Roenick. I don't remember off the top of my head. But McDavid should have gotten a high stick for that earlier in the game as well. I can say that objectively. But the officials were bad. And when the officials are bad, players take things into their own hands. And we, as adults in civilized society, we can understand that vigilante justice is not a good thing. We don't want people to make extrajudicial decisions on their own. And I can imagine there are a number of people listening to me explain my position on this and saying, Nick, Garland is a known rat. He has consistently been and always has been this type of player. He is a nuisance. He is a pest. He is constantly trying to goad people into taking penalties. And good for McDavid for standing up for himself and hurting the guy who was causing a problem for him. That there are a lot of people who wish Connor played with more of an edge, with more of a snarl to his game, and would take it up upon himself to correct what he would perceive to be injustices against him. And like I said a minute ago, and I'm going to repeat now, it sucks having to do the right thing sometimes when you have been wronged. It is not easy to turn the other cheek, to accept being wronged. It isn't. It fundamentally isn't, but it is one of the core tenets of keeping everything moving. And We will talk about the game in the second segment, but the undoubtable biggest story coming out of this game is the fact that the best player in the world is going to be suspended for a game or two. He has a hearing on McDavid has a hearing on Monday, as does Tyler Myers, who also deserves to be suspended for the hit on Evan Bouchard. That one is especially egregious because it was away from the play. It was entirely unjustified. And look, I am not prepared to say what McDavid did was justified. And I'm going to quote the great stand-up comedian Bill Burr. I am not saying it's okay. I do not justify it, but I can understand. I can understand that Connor McDavid felt like he was being mugged in the middle of the play. The referees were letting it happen, and he was fed up. He knew the Oilers were about to lose the game because the clock was running out. He knew and knows that Garland is a menace, a pest, whatever pejorative you want to use to describe him. And he was fed up. And look, I can say this as an admirer of the professional wrestler CM Punk. I understand wanting to punch people you work with that you don't like. I can absolutely understand. I can even empathize. I can venture as far as to say I can empathize with Connor McDavid being tired of Connor Garland being a miserable pain to play against. That's entirely reasonable. Connor McDavid is a person. He does have feelings, and the referees allowing that sequence to continue put the onus on McDavid to retaliate, and McDavid retaliated inappropriately. I both of those things can be true simultaneously, and I know there are a lot of people on the internet, and they happen to be Vancouver, Calgary, fans of teams that have track records of problems with the Oilers. And look, let me extend an olive branch. What McDavid did was not okay. I can understand it, though. I absolutely can understand it. And I can look at that situation and say, well, the referees don't want to decide the game while the game's hanging in the balance like that. If they call a penalty, the Oilers would have had to turn the puck over for the Canucks to get a touch up for it to be a penalty. And would the Oilers have scored in their 6 seconds of power play? And does it really matter? And look, all of the rhetorical games, all of the conversation, it's all rooted in a frustration. And Sidney Crosby got it a lot more earlier in his career. That reputation of being whiny, of being a dirty player. And I don't think McDavid's a dirty player. I do think he's tired of what other players do to him, and on occasion he retaliates, and it's not okay. It is fundamentally not okay for your best player to do something like that. And it's going to sound weird me saying this, but it is selfish when you react that way as a player, because you are saying me getting even is more important than the game. And Garland sitting on McDavid trying to stand back up, and Garland wrapping his legs around him so he couldn't. It's immature nonsense. Garland absolutely should have gotten a penalty for it. At least twice in that sequence, he should have gotten a penalty for interference or roughing, whichever one you want to call there, because the puck's not there. And it sucks, because now, instead of talking about, well, the Oilers didn't play well, they found a way to claw back in the game, Draisaitl had another great game, they were right there till the end. Yeah, they didn't win, but they had stuff they could feel good about. They go into the next game, blah, 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 blah. But instead, we have to sit here and we have to talk about, well, now what do the Oilers do without McDavid for a game? How do they balance out the lineup? What are they going to do for this? What are they going to do for that? And we have the prevailing sentiment amongst the casual NHL fan that McDavid's a dirty, immature, whatever other insult you want to use to describe him, because they're jealous of how good he is. Yeah, it's not cool what he did, but at the end of the day, I can understand it. And that's really the difference. I am willing to cross that bridge of saying, yeah, he's going to get suspended for it. He should get suspended for it. I also understand why he did it. We are going to take our first break of today's show, and when we come back, we'll talk about the game in depth coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, so be sure to stick around. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of betting options keeps every game exciting. It's championship weekend in the NFL next weekend. The Washington Commanders going up 95 to Philly to take on the Eagles, where the Eagles are 5.5 points, and you know what it is. AFC title game, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Arrowhead. Fourth time these teams are meeting in the playoffs. The Chiefs have won the 3 previous playoff contests. The Chiefs are 1.5 point home field favorites. I cannot wait for next Sunday. Visit FanDuel.com or download the app and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. Down here in the States, it's a holiday, so the episode might be trickling out a little bit later than usual. Also jumped on over to Game Over Montreal to talk about the Rangers and Canadiens game on Sunday night, which was running concurrently with Ravens. I almost said Ravens Sabres, which shows where my brain is at. Ravens Bills, which was a tremendous football game. And Saturday night, I stayed in on a Saturday night for the first time in a while, and I watched the Canucks and the Oilers, and once again, the Oilers got out to a slow start. And some of it is just the inherent volatility of professional hockey. We all know that goaltending is not a science. Goaltending is as close as we're going to get to magic or pseudoscience being an actuality as we're going to get in the world, in a world governed by laws and rules of nature, if you will. I am not a science person. The extent of my knowledge of physics is very limited to what I can recall from some of the exposition scenes in Oppenheimer and high school physics, where I think I finished that class at like a 73. So I'm not exactly a bastion of science, but the Oilers are continuing to put themselves in these difficult positions. And I don't want to make every single game a referendum on whatever result happens. If it's a good result, well, Leon's the MVP, Connor's right there, Bush is great, blah, blah. I really try to watch the games with a critical lens, with the idea and the question, the recurring question of, what am I taking away from this? Because when you sit down and you watch game after game after game, week after week, month after month, year after year, you are constantly trying to pursue a greater understanding. And that's what anybody who watches a sport with a critical lens, whether they're just a smart fan, whether they're a content person, a journalist, a decision maker, a stakeholder, I always am trying to learn a little bit more, whether that's about a player, how a team plays, how a lineup takes shape. And right now, the Oilers still feel like a little bit of a work in progress. You know, the roster transactions, putting Derek Ryan on waivers, loaning Josh Brown back to Bakersfield, there's something there. The Evander Kane thing is lingering down the pike. John Klingberg, who we did a bonus episode on Friday about, is lingering as a decision the Oilers are going to have to make. He was put on injured reserve on Saturday ahead of their game against the Canucks. We'll see how long it takes for Klingberg to get some run on the Oilers at the NHL level. But all of that said, the Oilers need to find ways to settle into these games. And we talk about this idea a lot in the playoffs, that playoff games typically start slow because both teams are overly cautious. They don't want to make a mistake. They typically ease themselves into the game. You know, you want that first hit just to kind of wake yourself up. You'll dump the puck into the offensive zone. You'll go after it. You'll put pressure on the defense. Just get the legs moving, the blood flowing. And you don't want your goalie, the first shot he faces, to be a good shot. You want him to ease, to work his way into the game, because especially for Skinner, especially for Stuart Skinner, when he gets off to an easy start in a game, he doesn't have to do a lot, a couple easy saves. he plays with so much more confidence and such an ease that he puts me at ease when I am watching. And that's really what I am looking for from my starting goalie at any point. Does he look like he's fighting? Does he look like he's swimming anytime he's on the ground? Or is he maintaining his technique? Is he reacting promptly? Is he making plays on the puck? Is he controlling his rebounds? Is he killing plays? Is he doing his job? And it's frustrating when the team continually puts their goalie at a disadvantage. And the type of start they got off to on Saturday night, that's tough sledding. You give up 2 power play goals in the first period, both from defensemen. And look, you can say what you want as far as conceding defenseman goals. They're typically of a lower quality because the defenseman's going to take them from play, but at the very same time, you can't be putting yourselves in that position where you're taking those penalties early on in the game. And the first Quinn Hughes goal, it takes a weird bounce. It's okay to say, well, Skinner didn't really have the greatest of angles. He's got traffic in front. The puck takes a weird. All of that is perfectly reasonable. But you think about how that game develops and you think about the issues the Oilers have, especially in that first period where they're playing behind the 8 ball from the get-go, it decreases your margin for error. And we've talked about this concept a ton on Locked On Oilers this season, that you want to give your guys as much leeway, as much runway, as many paths to victory as possible. And when you get behind big early, when you fall behind 2 or 3-0, your path to victory shrinks exponentially, because even if you score 1 and they score 1, you're right back where you started, same deficit. So you exponentially inhibit your means of finding wins when you get to these deficits. And look, and I know I've used that segue more than once. I'm being a little aggressive with the hand gestures when I say and look too, but the Oilers are uniquely situated talent-wise to get themselves back in these games. And again, Leon was tremendous on Saturday. I thought he had one of his best games of the season. I felt that the Oilers had every capacity and every chance to win that game until they blew the play dead when Garland and McDavid were tangled up and ultimately McDavid cross-checked them in the face. Until that sequence, I felt pretty good that the Oilers were going to tie the game. The Canucks are a fragile team that has played atrocious defense other than Quinn Hughes all year, and that are very susceptible to big swings of momentum because they're a volatile team. The JT Miller, Elias Pettersson rumors that have continued to burn season long and will not die down. We'll see if that ultimately gets resolved in the coming weeks or not, but falling behind consistently is going to only hurt your chances. And this happened quite a bit in recent weeks. You think about the games against Pittsburgh, Chicago, Minnesota, the Canuck game. You keep accumulating those types of deficits, and it becomes hard, A, to get off to better starts because that's in the back of your goalie's head, and B, it is a tough way to live. We know the splits of teams when they score first versus when they score second, and what that says about the way hockey is played in today's game, where it is so difficult to score 2 unanswered goals when the other team scores first just because of the way the game takes shape. We're going to take one more quick break. We'll talk a smidge more about the game against the Canucks. We'll talk about how I would expect the Oilers to handle an absence of McDavid for a game or 2 pending a suspension after his hearing on Monday, what it means for Derek Ryan getting waived, and a whole lot more on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. So be sure to stick around. Do not miss the final segment. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. One more time, that's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl so they know we sent you. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. Thank you to everyone who's hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are recapping the Oilers' tough loss to the Canucks. And when you are a team that is firmly in the playoff mix like the Oilers are, all of these games matter to varying degrees. But when you are playing a divisional opponent in what is effectively a 4-point game, and you had a chance to pass Vegas for first place in the division and get closer to Winnipeg for first overall in the conference, it's really, really frustrating when you fall behind that way that early, because it puts you in a position where you got to score 2 or 3 straight goals. And the Oilers might be the best team in the league at making up multi-goal deficits. That doesn't mean that's how you want to play. And getting out of this habit, getting out of this funk, and I can't even really call it a funk because they've won some of the games where they've fallen behind in these big deficits because they're so good. But getting off to good starts puts you in such a position to succeed. You don't even need to score first. You just don't want to concede 2 in the first 10 minutes, because then you got to go 50 minutes where you got to score 3 straight, and you can't give up another one if you want to win the game in regulation. And the Canucks, for all of their warts, for all of their locker room issues, for all of their poor play, they're a talented hockey team. Elias Pettersson, when he's going right, he's Hart Trophy good. Quinn Hughes won the Norris last year. I would argue he's been the best defenseman in the NHL this year. Thatcher Demko, when he's healthy, is Vezina-ish, 5th, 6th best goalie in the world. They have Brock Besser, who can score 30 like that. They have Garland, who effective, useful, middle 6 player, 40, 50 point guy. They have enough talent where if you make mistakes, they will burn you. You saw the 2 power play goals. And the Oilers this year, when they've been at their best, they have won that special teams battle decisively and then been able to put the game away at 5-on-5. The Oilers, I don't think one loss to the Canucks is doom, but I do think it should be a bit of a wake up. I think it should serve the function of saying, we're kind of getting into a bad habit here. We need to get off to better starts. We're playing Washington, who's one of the best teams in the entire league, has had a really nice season, somewhat surprisingly. We'll talk about that game after the game on Monday. We'll have an episode for you promptly as usual. And then you see Vancouver again on Thursday, and I'm sure it will be a spirited affair. Hopefully McDavid isn't suspended 2 games so he can get back in the game on Thursday, and we can see these 2 teams closer to full strength go head-to-head, because that's what you want. You don't want to see shorthanded teams. You want to see the Oilers without McDavid playing the Canucks. That's not fun. And look, McDavid's going to probably get 1 game. If he avoids suspension and only gets a fine, he and the Department of Player Safety will be ridiculed, and there will be favoritism. There will be star favoritism calls. It will be insufferable. And I myself have really tried to make it a rule of thumb to not engage on these morality and these quality of play conversations, especially as it pertains to the Department of Player Safety, because I do not understand what the goal of the Department of Player Safety is, because their rulings are so inconsistent. I can't ascertain whether it's to protect players who get hurt, to discipline players who consistently injure other players, if it's to give the illusion of caring because of how many things get let go and how under penalized players are for said indiscretions. But I feel McDavid deserves one game. The play he made was dangerous, unnecessary, and a retaliatory act. He's got 3 steps there. And look, McDavid, I don't think is a dirty player. I think he gets fed up and occasionally snaps, which I can understand. There have been times I have heard the ding of Slack, Microsoft Teams, of Gmail, and thought, oh, why am I doing this? And want to punch someone, punch a hole in the wall. And I take a deep breath and I go and do my job, because that's what you do when you're a professional. McDavid needed to keep his cool. I understand why he didn't. I am not going to fault the guy for losing his cool when he felt he was wronged and the measures within the game didn't protect him. That's reasonable. He didn't need to do it. He shouldn't have, but I get it. I can live with that. If he doesn't play, you probably expect the Oilers to go 11-7 again. You probably expect to see some combination of Draisaitl, Podkolzin, and Hyman as a first line. And the rest of the lineup, it'll be piecemeal. Noah Phillip might get the short end for taking the penalties he did in the Canucks game. We'll see. Waiving Derek Ryan as opposed to sending him back down to the AHL, I do find interesting. We'll see if Derek Ryan clears waivers. First of all, there's a chance he gets claimed. I could see Derek Ryan getting claimed by a few teams. I could see the Flames claiming him. I could see the Sharks, the Blackhawks. There are quite a few teams I could see claiming Derek Ryan to fill a 4th line center role. But I hope that, I can't even say I hope that. I know the discourse around McDavid tomorrow is going to be insufferable, and it's going to make me question why I care so much about what people on the internet think as far as driving conversation. But I do think that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everyone who listened to today's show. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes live. I will talk to you guys tomorrow night, Monday night. It's Monday night when you're Monday when you're watching this. I'll talk to you guys tonight after the game against the Capitals. Until then, let's go Oilers.